Welcome. Before we get started, we have somebody that wants to record this meeting for public posterity. Joe Lyman. Does anybody have any objections to it being recorded? Hearing none, we'll assume it's okay. I'd like to introduce people that are up here to help answer questions and explain about the project. My name is Tom Wyatt. I live on Northfield Road. I'm the chair of the Warwick Broadband Committee. And I will turn it over this way.
Bill Foote, I'm the co-chair, I guess, of the Broadband Committee as well.
Scott Seagull, I'm the clerk of the Broadband Committee.
And
My name is Glenn Cardinal. I live in Buckland. I am a member of the executive committee for WiredWest. I've been doing so for 4 years, and a delegate 5 years in the town of Buckland. And hopefully I'll be able to answer some questions. I'm sure you do have some.
And I am John Bradford, and I am your WiredWest delegate.
so we thought we'd let Glenn do a little background, explain about things. We had a lively discussion here last night, Glenn, and
So cool.
but we'll have more tonight. The focus of this meeting is primarily going to be questions and answers. We don't have a presentation. There are handouts you can take home, but let's try and focus on whatever people have, the concerns and questions.
Yeah, I suspect that most of you are somewhat familiar with what the Fiber to Home initiative is all about. Let me give you a little background about the executive committee. It's comprised of 8 members, each with a specific skill set, from legal to finance to administrative to sales. And some of those duties cross people as well in terms of people doing other duties. Some of the meetings I've been to have questioned many of our credentials. And I'll give you a little background of mine. Let me know if I'm going to bore you to death or not. I spent 45 years in the radio and television business, operating TV and radio stations up and down the valley. Built my own station, sold it. Anybody's familiar with WPVQ, the Bear, out of Greenfield. That's one I built and sold. Been pretty successful in business. Somewhat retired right now, except that I'm busier now than I was when I was operating all the radio stations. If anybody's retired and they go, how did I ever get anything done? Between the school board, the Mohawk Trail School District, the Historical Society, the fire department, of course, WiredWest, which consumes an enormous amount of time, all days of the week. No such thing as a weekend off. I've got a couple of questions. In Warwick, I know that you have some point-to-point wireless broadband accessibility. And there are some people that are hooked up with Verizon's DSL. And I would assume that a few people have a satellite dish up on the roof to access internet, and probably another dish to access television program. Am I close?
Yeah, except for the DSL.
Pardon?
Except for DSL.
I think there might be one DSL person.
Only one.
Yeah, they don't
Here.
make it up yet.
Well, one more, right, southern end of town, there's maybe 1 or 2 houses that are within range of the orange and DSL.
Gotcha.
There's no
So,
one.
The wires aren't good enough.
yeah. So you're really relegated to the point-to-point, which is not a bad thing, or satellite.
Right.
How's your telephone service?
It's terrible.
That's usually the response I get. That's
Ours
unfortunate.
is perfect. We run a whole business on Verizon line.
I'm sorry?
We run a whole business on a Verizon phone line, and we have no outages. Our phone line's perfect. I don't know if I live in a special corner of this town or whatever, but we don't have any issues with anything.
So you do or do not have good service?
We have good service.
You have
We
good
have perfect service.
You probably have the newest pair of twisted copper, and that's probably why.
I don't know if they have to run that because we're a business. In the beginning, we had issues with the phone line, it kept calling 911 like 15 times in a day. And, because of a cross connection, and ever since then, they repaired the lines and they've been perfect.
You're one of the fortunate ones. One of the edicts from AT&T and Verizon relative to wired lines or landlines is that they want to abandon all of that stuff by the year 2020. Includes DSL and regular landline service. What they want to do is force people to use wireless cell phone, and where they have any kind of fiber or coax deployed, convert people to a more expensive system. Warwick isn't one of those communities that have Verizon or AT&T fiber or coaxial cable. It's aging copper, and by the response about how your phone service was, I guess that it's continuing to age, it's turning green. It's just not go away. There are some communities where through bad storms, Verizon wouldn't come back and replace it. They suggested they go to a wireless system, cell phone system. Just some little bits of information.
We don't have, just for your information, we don't have wireless service, phone service in this town over most of the town.
Yeah, you're like most of the other 32 towns that are in this initiative. Cell service is spotty at best, and something you can't really rely on, especially in the summertime when the trees leaf out. A lot of iron in the ground, and the iron goes up in the leaves, and if you get a connection, you got a call that you can talk on, the wind blows, moves the tree over, and you lose it. That's a real problem. There doesn't seem to be a very large push to install additional towers. And I've had conversations with Verizon and AT&T, and they basically say the population doesn't warrant putting up another tower. So, you know, that does not bode well for the towns in Franklin County and Berkshire County, because it just, what do we do for communication?
And we actually have a couple of towers, but have yet to been able to get any kind of a supplier that wants to be on the service.
2 vacant towers?
Not vacant.
Not vacant,
Well, I
but
mean,
they're still
from a
using
wireless
it.
carrier. Yeah, there's one, there's wireless now.
But there's another tower that's
They're using it.
Right.
Yeah.
It was just built on speculation.
That's pretty sad. Again, they may not have done it because the population doesn't warrant it. I had the same problem in Buckland, and, you know, we have 2,200 people in town. They said, no, can't justify putting up the tower or spending money. No, there's a few more players in here. Questions? I'm sure a lot of them came up last night. Hopefully most of them got answered satisfactorily. But I'm here to entertain more if you'd like. Yes, sir.
One of my big concerns would be cost of maintenance down the road. Just the last couple of years, we've had some serious windstorms come through here, take down power lines, take down phone lines. I suspect it will take down fiber optic lines as well. And I believe we're gonna be the owner of that with the other 23 or 4 towns or whoever manages to get involved in this.
Right.
And I'm concerned about, we're all kind of a little fish in a big pond with those other towns. I hope we can prorate the cost of maintenance by the number of users in a town, let's say. I don't know how that's all gonna be thrashed out and if and when this happens, but I hope whoever is our advocate will see to it that we pay our fair share, but no more.
That's the goal, fair share. I think I heard a couple of questions there. Who's gonna maintain it? WiredWest is gonna maintain it. How's it gonna be paid for? By subscribers. It's all incorporated in the bill. For example, if you take 25 megs of service for $49 a month, part of that money's goes for maintenance when we need it. We expect to have 2 maintenance centers, one in Berkshire County, one in Franklin County, so that we can be within 45 minutes of a service call with bucket trucks or vans or whatever.
I was just gonna say, relating to part of the question about, because there are fewer people in Warwick, are we gonna have to pay more for maintenance? That would, the $49 is gonna be the same no matter what town you live in, so the people in Warwick are gonna pay the same as the people in the larger towns.
Yeah, it'll be the same across the board. Hopefully we'll get 32 towns that will join this initiative, because the more towns we have, the less expensive it'll be to build the network. There are scales of economy. We buy a lot of fiber optic cable and the electronics that go on both ends.
One of the things I've also heard about fiber optic cable is that compared to copper cables, it is considerably stronger.
It is.
And there's been numerous situations where trees have fallen on it or the wires have come down, and the wires have held the trees
Yeah.
In place, or if they've gone to the ground, they're still intact.
Yes.
As somebody who's had a lot of problems with copper phone lines getting hit by lightning, back when we had those, that's not going to be an issue here, right?
No, the glass is non-conductive. The way the signals run through the fiberglass is light. So they're not impacted by RF, they're not impacted by lightning. A transformer would be the first thing to go on the pole. So, yeah, they're not impacted by that. Yes, sir.
This, just walked in on my list, this stated, but by implication, is WiredWest going to be owning and hiring a maintenance operation, or WiredWest going to be contracting that out, the bucket trucks, the vans, the full-time people?
If we can't find local talent, and that's our goal, keep the money here in Western Massachusetts, we will for a short time subcontract that out. But again, local entities, as local as we can get.
So are you saying that you'd like to be buying bucket trucks and
Eventually, yeah. If we had it our way, we would own and run everything with the people we hire locally. Will that be possible, first off? Can't really answer that question. However, maintenance and operation will be taken care of. Yes, sir.
Who defines the Warwick service area? The Warwick Municipal Electric Company or WiredWest?
Who defines Warwick's area?
Service area.
Well, it's a regional network. I would say, it's an interesting question, never been posed to me before. The town boundaries, pretty much. I mean, if you're looking for a geographic area that defines Warwick, is that what you're looking for, or?
That's not what I said, no, sir. I said, who defines the service area
WiredWest.
in Warwick?
Well, it would go to everybody in Warwick, so
Well,
WiredWest.
in other words, WiredWest defines it.
Yeah.
Okay.
A relevant question related to that, Ted, is say there was a property that was just over the line in Winchester or Northfield. Would they be able to get WiredWest?
I mean, our initial focus is to take care of the towns that have joined. Once we get that done, if somebody 2 poles away from your house on a particular street goes into New Hampshire, a request could be made, and there's certainly a possibility that we could extend the fiber. If that's what you're thinking about.
No, actually, I was thinking of subtracting rather than adding.
You mean shrinking the coverage?
Yes.
I really don't, our goal is to pass it by every house in Warwick proper. Doesn't mean that everybody's gonna take it initially, but we wanna have the ability to string a drop from that telephone pole to a person's home, where they'll be subscribing. So shrinking it, were you thinking if it were shrunk, it would cost less to do?
I'm just defining the issues, that's all.
Okay, I was just curious, myself. There's almost a question here. Yes, ma'am?
Do you have an idea for time-wise for installation for the whole town?
We're looking at about an 18-month period for all the make-ready work to be done, and shortly thereafter, and I'll explain make-ready in a half second, we can start running the fiber, and within a matter of months, we can start lighting up some of the communities. They're not all going to happen at the same time because it's a huge project. Make-ready involves licensing, inspecting telephone poles for both the phone company and also the power company. Each of the poles that we're going to run wires on has to be looked at for height, what kind of condition the pole is in, and how much in the way of moving wires has to be done. All that has to be determined prior to running any fiber. As you probably all know, you've got power at the top. Sometimes you have a transformer. The bottom wire is the aging copper from the telephone company, and we would go above the telephone wire. But height is an issue, big trucks and so on and so forth. So all that has to be looked at and measured. And there's something like, I remember it correctly, 35 to 40,000 poles that have to be inspected. You remember what that number was? It's a huge, huge number. And we have to rely.
Just Warwick, or is that overall?
Overall, 32 towns. But it all needs to be done at once so we can start building it out.
Now, Glenn, you're not talking about 18 months from our town meeting vote this May, you're talking about after the following year, right?
Well, we've got to wait for the IT bond money to actually be passing through the Mass Broadband Institute. That should be coming up shortly, but I suspect it will probably happen after your town meeting, which is what, in May?
Mm-hmm.
So, when that gets passed by a 2/3 vote, WiredWest will not be looking for a check for $1.6 million. Asking for money will happen further down the road after the state spends their money to initiate the make-ready costs for the telephone poles and the power poles. So from a timing standpoint, when will things actually be constructed? It's still going to take 12 to 18 months to get the pole permits so that we can get our crews up there and run the fiber. So we're a little bit away. And we're.
NBI is saying 4 years?
I'm sorry?
I think the NBI is estimating 4 years.
For completion? Yeah, I think they're erring on the side of caution. And that's all 32 towns, or actually they're looking at it as 44. Did that document mention 44 towns or 32?
Well, there are 44 unserved towns, that doesn't mean all 44.
Yeah. Yeah, you're being conservative with that. That doesn't mean that towns won't be lit up sooner than that. That just means that all the towns won't be completed.
But as far as I understand, it's not till June of 2016 that everything is sort of applications are all made, we've got our responses, then the work can actually start?
Yes.
Okay, so then it would be 18 months or whatever after that. So we're talking 2018 probably at the earliest.
Could be sooner.
Could
It
be.
depends on how quickly the power company moves.
Good luck on that.
Yeah. Well, just to give you a little story, when the middle mile was done, the power company and phone company did all those permitting requests on paper. Since then, they computerized it, so hopefully we'll go a little bit quicker.
How will you determine in what order the towns get lit up? So you start on whatever date, and is it alphabetical, is it geographic, how long?
Reverse alphabetical.
Dartboard. No.
In the southeast.
Reverse alphabetical.
True. Geographically, they're little clusters of towns. Warwick is kind of in that cluster with Shutesbury, Wendell, and New Salem.
Right.
And I gotta tell you, those towns have been really aggressively going out there and getting people to sign up. One of the things that we're gonna look at is how many people have signed up, and if the town is not an outlier, I mean, if it's just kind of sticking out here all by itself, that's not real favorable unless they get 100% sign up. But if this cluster of towns has outstanding take rates, people signing up ahead of time, and you pass the 2/3 vote, you get enough people, it's gonna make sense to light this up first. Then there's another cluster of towns to the south, in Berkshire County, that are together, and then we got the northern tier, so on and so forth. But it really is a numbers game. The ones with the most subscribers are probably gonna, because what happens is, you get lit up, that money starts coming into WiredWest. The quicker we're able to offset some of the bond costs in some of these towns, it just helps. Yes.
So you're saying the most subscribers, are you talking percentages or numbers? Because we're pretty small.
Yep, so is New Salem and Wendell.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
So are you talking percentages or are you talking actual numbers?
good question. I would go with numbers rather than percentages, because, 40% of 100 is 40, and obviously if you get a larger pool to draw from, it's going to be more.
Well, you just said right there that we're gonna be towards the end as far as being lit up then. The
Well,
bundled with other.
there are only a few towns that far exceed, the population. Beckett's a big one. But they're also in a cluster as well.
Well, your town, Buckland is almost twice as big.
Buckland's not included in this.
Well,
No, what I'm saying is Buckland is what's considered a partially cable town. So we're not going to get fiber, nor is Shelburne, nor is Northfield, or Conway, or Chester, or Huntington. They're all partially cable towns. What MBI decided to do, just FYI, is to try to incent the incumbent in town, namely Comcast, to finish building out the towns. We'll see how that goes. But right now, those towns with large populations are not included in this. So you wouldn't be competing with the town size of Buckland or Shelburne or Conway, that's not in the mix.
I can kind of, I think, answer the question, and then you can correct me for what
Sure.
I said is wrong.
Yeah.
But I think that the driving principle is going to be what makes economic sense. So a place like Warwick, on the surface, isn't going to be the first pick, but if there happens to be a technological reason that laying the cable here would benefit WiredWest, then it might all of a sudden become an important place to wire just because of, technological concerns. That, it's hard to know until it's actually started.
If those 5 towns that I mentioned, New Salem and
Wendell.
Wendell and Shutesbury,
Shutesbury.
are all up at a high count, and say you only have 200 residents in town?
No, we have
800.
800 residents, we have
Premises.
330, somewhere in there.
It's not that small. If that whole group does well with pre-sign-up, it'll be on the higher list of priorities to get done as soon as possible.
So people know, I checked today, midday, we were at 29% of getting to our goal of 40%.
Right, and could I share the numbers that Al McIntyre of Wendell called and wanted to know about this particular point, who would be the priority of service. So Shutesbury is already at 92%, needing only 24 more backers.
Yep.
And Wendell's at 84%, needing 25 backers. New Salem at 70%, needing 56 more backers. And he said we were at 30% or 29%, needing more backers. So
We need 112.
thank you, 112, okay. So, thank you for addressing that. So I just shared that because it seems like this was of interest right now.
It is, I mean, and if these towns that are adjacent do well with subscribers, it'll be looked at as like, yeah, let's fire this up.
Okay, and that's what his question was. So thank you, I'll get back to him.
Can I get clarification on that? That's of the population or percentage of their goal?
The latter.
Yeah.
The goal.
Of the goal.
Okay,
so-
because
so
I was gonna say, that's a huge,
No,
Yeah, so
Okay.
90% of the 40% they need.
okay, right,
Right.
gotcha.
Yes, and that's
Yeah.
what Shutesbury is, means.
Okay.
Less than their-
So at 26%, we're 60% of the way there.
Right. We need to contact 112 people and get them to sign up. Then you're there. Yes, sir.
I have a question on, the state is contributing, as I understand it, $40 million to this project. Let's say Walt passes it and we vote a bond, and then we're on the list to get wired. How is that money gonna be spent? Is our bond gonna be spent wiring Shrewsbury, because they're first on the list? Is the 40 million gonna be used to wire Shrewsbury? Is it gonna be divided up amongst the towns that are involved, or how is that gonna play out?
All right. The state is going to evenly, well, not perfectly evenly. It depends on fiber miles and the number of drops that are needed when they lay out the engineering. So your question was, who pays for that? And, will you be paying for other towns with your bond authorization?
Well, yes, will we pay it with our bond money?
No.
And
That money stays
would the
there.
40 million be used up before they finally get the wall to wire
Oh,
us,
no.
so that our bond needs to
Good
be
question,
wired?
good question.
No, that money will not be used up. And actually, if the 32 towns who have signed resolutions to move forward with the WiredWest, there's another remaining 12 that are either not doing anything or coming up with some hybrid, but going it on their own, which will be more expensive because there will not be any economies of scale for purchasing equipment. Part of that $40 million is going to be held aside for them as well. The state feels as though that bond bill at $40 million needs to address all of the unserved areas. We just happen to be in an MLP cooperative that looked at a plan that could make it cheaper to do, and perhaps get it done quicker. The other communities, the state has said, well, we have to set aside some of that money for these other towns, and we'll give them 3 years to act on it. If they don't act on it, the money goes away. So, the money for the bond bill that gets voted on for the authorization in Warwick, that money stays in Warwick. That's for Warwick's build-out. Same for any of the other towns. The money that they opt to get a loan on stays in their town. What gets shared by the state is engineering and make-ready from that $40 million.
And is the state money the first money that's used as far as the construction goes?
Yep, going to use the state's money first.
But is that, they're gonna be used in each town, prorated by the miles needed to get wired? Or is it gonna be used by the first towns to get wired? I guess that's the question.
Okay, so the money that comes from the state,
I believe that's segregated by,
it's by road miles and potential drops
In each town.
in each town. In each town, it's different.
So we should end up with a piece of it.
So if we're
Yeah.
first or if we're last, we'll get the same state money.
Oh, yeah.
That was the question.
A related question to that, if we're last to be built out, that means it'll actually be longer before we're actually having to borrow the money and incur the cost associated with that borrowing.
Yeah, well, collect empties, cash them in, so you can pay them out.
So, you mentioned two maintenance facilities, one in the Berkshires, one in Franklin County. Are you looking at a site in Franklin County right now?
We will be, but, we're not in the business right now. I mean, part of the business plan is to have two locations, in a spot where it will not take more than 45 minutes. At the longest, it would be 45 minutes to the outland.
So probably Warwick wouldn't be one of those.
Probably not, and I don't have, we haven't looked at any sites at this particular point in time, because we're really quite a ways away from setting that up. Yes?
I'm beginning to get an idea in my head about how this could conceivably work economically, which is a surprise, but
Yes.
but it depends upon the relative per household bond cost. Comparing Warwick with the rest of the towns. If Warwick's is much, much higher than the average, I can see how it could work. Can you give us a figure on the average per household cost of the capital expenditure
Are you talking about
over the town?
potentially what a property tax would be an increase, or
It'll be like that, but that's not precisely what I'm asking for. I'm asking for,
what does it cost to go to your house?
we're putting out 1.6 million, let's say,
Yep.
which will come to around $5,000 per household. If that is comparable to the per household figure for the rest of the towns, it seems to me that the whole system is not going to be able to pay back Warwick or any of the other towns. On the other hand, if Warwick's $5,000 per household is very high relative to the others, then the rest of the system will have some leeway to pay people back, including Warwick. So I'm asking, what is, if you went down through the list of towns and got an average figure on the bond issue per household, what would it be?
I can tell you what the range is.
That would be a good start.
I'm sorry?
That would be a good start.
Okay. I mean, I could add up 32 sets of numbers and divide them by 32, but there's an awful lot of figures here. The cost per premise, from a town share perspective through the bond, ranges from a low of $1,700 to a high of $9,000.
And what's Warwick's on that list?
Warwick comes in at $3,800, $3,879.53. That's the cost per premise, the town share.
Was that figured on the number of residents, the number of households that you guys have been working with, or the number of households in reality? Because I understand things like outhouses got counted as,
That's been correct.
Yeah, David provided a correct number of
Well,
330.
things got counted that weren't real.
So these numbers are based on the correct numbers.
Yeah, the initial number that came in at like an additional 100 drops. And David worked back and identified those that were made in error, and they've now since corrected it to.
So my question is, does the 3,800, is that figure for your old number of households, or is it for the new number of households?
New.
Thank you.
I think one of the important points of when the number of 3,800 per household sounds pretty scary. And I think one of the important points about this plan is that it pays back the towns and that it make a profit so that with its revenue so that it can pay back the towns. And the way they've done some careful financial modeling, and the way it works is that they're looking about the paybacks coming after just a few years. And then after that, there's any debt that we have is paid back directly by the money that's taken in.
The goal,
Well, my question has to do with that precisely. The question is, if every town is at 3,800 per household, then it is very scary, because the system as a whole will not have the money to pay back.
it
Warwick.
will have, if,
So it has to be substantially under Warwick's 3,800 for the towns as a whole, for it to work.
I think the point is that the greater the average cost per household system-wide, the harder it would be for WiredWest to be sustainable. And the question is the average cost per household across the whole system lower than that in Warwick? And that's where the concern here is.
Right,
Yeah.
that's the question.
just looking at the numbers without a calculator, I'm going to say that, yes, in total, the average is probably lower than Warwick.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can do it by taking up those 32 numbers and
Yeah, you gotta
and
figure it
dividing
out.
by 32, because
Yeah,
they're
I mean,
weighted according to.
There's a whole bunch of it. Your big concern is whether or not WiredWest would be able to pay back any and all towns.
Yeah.
Yes, no?
Well, I don't want a yes or no answer to that, because your answer is going to be yes. I want an answer to the question that says, here's how it works, that will pay back. And if all the towns are at 3,800 per household, it won't work.
One of the points that David Young made last night, and he's set up the Warwick broadband service and knows a lot about cost of getting internet, is that if you took the $49 subscription thing and you look at the numbers for Warwick, there's no way that we could pay back our debt based on that. And so that's where being part of a cooperative of 32 towns really benefits us, because we don't really have the numbers, and in effect we're being subsidized to some extent by the other towns that have larger population.
If every,
Understood, but if the economics of it is just multiply Warwick by 32 and then divide by 32, it won't work. It'll only work if the other towns on average have a much lower per household cost. And so I think we need to have that to believe you.
Well, here's the thing, Nick. You're going to have towns with higher percentages of people. The people are going to be closer together. It's going to be cheaper to wire them. They're going to be under the 38. They're also going to have a greater percentage of people paying into the system because there are more people in those towns. So the towns that are high on the list are sparsely populated and aren't generating as much income. The towns that are low on the list for per house installation cost are going to be in areas that are generating a lot more money for WiredWest. So it really isn't a division of 32. You got to look at the population.
No, it's not, and I said it's not.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm agreeing.
But what we need to be able to say for ourselves, and it seems to me, when you're asking a town to vote $1.6 million, please, they have a right to be able to all figure it for themselves. And what we need for that, I think, is the average per household bond cost over the whole system. Because if that figure is low enough, then it's feasible for the bonds to be paid off. If it's too high, if it's up as high as Warwick, it's not feasible to pay them up.
That's correct. That's why all 32 towns need to be involved with a minimum of 40%. That money comes into WiredWest, it then goes back out to all the towns to service the debt. Yes.
I think that, I'm a little bit at an advantage to the rest of you. There was a new publication that came out today from the MBI who has the actual money in hand. Information from municipalities that went to the select boards. David probably has it. Unfortunately, probably the rest of you don't. But one of the really good points in here, and something that's been niggling at me since I came to the last meeting, is we really rushed this. MBI was kind of put on the spot to rush. And they're giving us 3 town meeting cycles to come up to make this decision this fall and next spring. And I worked with a FERCog. I know where a lot of the data came from that gave us outhouses for premises. The data wasn't that great. They asked us for it in a really big hurry. And I'm not sure we don't have the answer to Nick's question. We don't have a lot of information that we need. I guess I'm curious why it's so important to vote it this May. We could vote it next fall, we could vote it next May. By then, they will have done all the make-ready work, because that doesn't require any of our money. By then, they will have done the entire regional design, which doesn't require any of our money. And then they'll have real construction numbers, they'll have real premises numbers. A lot of the ambiguity that we have now will be worked out. Why wouldn't we just want to wait until we have all of the answers before we vote?
You're going to lose momentum, number one. Number two, people have been, I'm sure some people in this town have been going, well, we could really use robust broadband.
It won't get them any faster.
It will. It will. It's going to push MBI to get going. If they had their druthers to sit back and wait, they would probably do that. One of the things that WiredWest has been doing is pushing the legislators and MBI to, let's get moving on this stuff.
But hopefully not to the detriment of, hopefully not to the detriment of our, overall project by pushing it too fast.
I guess I'm not
And
seeing.
if we don't have all the information that we need, it seems to me that it would be prudent to at least wait till fall.
What types of information would you need?
Well, it appears that some of the data is not all necessarily in place. We're waiting to make sure that WiredWest can stand on their feet financially. You don't know yet if you have everything you need. If you don't know if you have the take rate that you need. I don't know. I guess I've been thinking about the size of that bond for this size of this town.
Yep.
And it's a huge, that's kind of commitment we've never seen before.
Yep.
And I just don't feel comfortable that we have all the information, and I'm just wondering why it would hurt to wait until fall. And I don't think the momentum issue really is that big. I mean, we're still gonna want it.
There is no reason you can't take it to a special meeting in the fall rather than the normal annual town meeting
Or even next spring.
coming up. Well, you could do that too. The bottom line is, for this regional network to move forward, if we don't have the commitment by townspeople, it just won't get built. 40% is the mark, which is not necessarily unreasonable percentage of townspeople, but you feel it's being rushed.
Well, that's definitely what the publication put out for the municipalities by the end of the day.
I think one of the broadband committee has been debating this amongst ourselves as to whether we should bring it to this annual town meeting, wait for a special, or even wait possibly till next spring. And we've been continuing, assuming that we would bring it this spring, but wanting to see because there's revised numbers coming in.
Yeah, everything is
And this
fluid.
premise count is a big thing because we dropped between 20 and 25% of premises, which affects a lot. So we haven't really made a decision yet, but you know, there's more information that keeps coming.
Yeah, it keeps coming. The unfortunate thing is, you know, without pointing fingers, some of the out-of-town consultants made some errors in putting those together. We've seen 3 sets, 4 sets, not to exceed numbers based on premises and fiber miles.
And doesn't that scare us?
I'm sorry?
And I would think that would be a concerning thing that these things.
Well,
Go ahead.
Your concerns are really valid. I totally get where you're coming from. There are a couple of things. One is Jim Draw has actually approached every number that came out of MBI as suspect and has gone back through the stuff. They've done models, he's done a model. It's all conjecture, and yeah, it's scary. It's a gamble. But there's been a lot of really intense thought put into it on the part of WiredWest, Jim, and other people. And, you know, his experiences in banking, which is not known for its risk-taking, so generally he tries to do everything as if it's going to go horribly wrong. And I will say, at the beginning of the process, I felt exactly the same way you do. The thing that's changed my mind is the ability of Jim to answer those questions when I ask them, and other members of the executive board. There are some things that aren't going to get clear. I mean, they're not going to do the make-ready work for Warwick if Warwick isn't a part of this.
Yes, sir.
I don't
That's
think,
what they said.
well,
The make-ready work is gonna be done this summer.
I would
2015,
be
it doesn't
surprised if
matter.
they do it for towns that weren't
Yeah.
part of it,
They are.
since it's a very big
Because
expense.
we are all part of it. We are an unserved town. The money is not going to WiredWest. The money is coming to the unserved towns, and we could do it ourselves if we wanted to.
Yeah.
But the make-ready work is specific to WiredWest. It's putting fiber on the poles, and if we haven't committed as a town to doing fiber, I don't know why they would
They're going to do
incur the
the
expense.
make-ready work, and they're going to do the regional design for everybody. Whether or not you're with WiredWest or on your own, or whatever you want to do.
Well, part of the issue, I think, for us is that things have come out of MBI before, which have not been
Quite accurate.
quite accurate, and we don't,
But
this
they-
is
but
new.
They have the money.
Well, they do.
They have the money.
But they
so
also
it's
have to
something
make it
that
work.
They've got to be able to all play nice together and trust each other. And I don't like our little town being pulled into the middle of that until we all feel really comfortable about what we're hearing from both sides. And
Yep,
it
so are
just
we.
makes me nervous.
I will say that last meeting, Eric, and I forget his last name now,
Nakajima.
did show up. He's head of MBI at this point, and he was very clear that he was committed to working with WiredWest. So, don't know where to take that.
It is disconcerting when you get different information, actually from the same source, MBI, because we've struggled with that as well. I haven't seen that document. It came out today. It emailed late this afternoon, or?
Midday, I saw.
Yes, sir.
The issue that I think many of us have is it's very difficult to see in our minds what you guys are saying. I'm trying to say, okay, if I'm paying so much a month for it, how is that money going? How much of it's going for maintenance? How much is going towards the bond or the debt? For the loan, whatever phase we're in. And the other thing you have to be aware of is 10% of the voters are here, probably. And it's probably, we're the most interested in this. So that until there is a very clear picture that can be painted, I don't think it's going to have a very good chance at town meeting. I asked the finance committee if they were going to be putting out maybe a 2 or 3 page description of the process and what was going on with their recommendation. And I didn't get much of an answer, frankly. It was an informal discussion. But it sounded to me like the finance committee was prepared to stand up and say at town meeting, we go for it, or we don't go for it. And that's not gonna be good enough. There's gotta be a very idiot-proof presentation made so simpletons like me can figure out what it is that we're talking about. Most of us in town don't entirely trust folks that come from out of town. We'd rather have our own people tell us it's a good deal than no offense. I don't mean that as an offense, it's just the way life here is in a small town like ours. And so this is a new thing. It needs a lot of work if it's going to be a success. And there are a lot of people who aren't here because they just say, oh, that bond amount is insane. Well, if you take a 20-year bond and break it down annually, then it's not quite such a big number. But it's still, we're talking a big number. And that needs to be explained down to monthly terms that folks can understand and say, okay, that's reasonable. I can live with that. It's not the 1.6 million, which frightens us all to death. That's a wicked whack on the tax rate. The idea that the town is going to take out the bond and be responsible for it for a project that's being done by WiredWest is a little, that needs to have some confidence put behind it.
Okay, I got two things to say. You've been sort of repeating yourself a little bit here. There will be an exhaustive financial business plan ready for your finance committee and anybody else in town who wants to look at it relative to WiredWest, available the third week in April.
The third week in April?
I'm sorry?
You said the third week in April?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's what he
third
said,
week in April. Yep,
prior to town meeting.
prior to town meeting. It sounds as though you didn't partake in the presentation that Jim Draw and Joe Markarian presented about the bonding.
Yes.
I most certainly did.
Okay, so those numbers for payback for interest and principal, it sounded as though you needed to see those. And those were presented, so I'm a little bit confused.
Well, there's more than one option that he talked about.
Okay.
Yes, we
And our
went through
finance
several
committee-
scenarios, and I guess
our
we haven't narrowed
finance
it down to
committee
the ones we're
has-
going to focus on.
Our finance committee has not given a hint as to which of the funding options they prefer.
Okay, so that's up to your finance committee to help you with that?
That's generally what a finance committee does, isn't
Okay.
it? I mean, they make recommendations to the town meeting.
That's,
And then we decide whether they're on track or not. But I wasn't what I was saying.
you might want to get with them a little earlier than town meeting, just so that you.
But our town meeting is the first week in May, so there's not gonna be much time.
Okay.
We keep hearing about four of these studies that have been done by outside consultants. Is there a way for us to be looking at these so that we can see the numbers? Can we go to the WiredWest website and?
Those studies are not available there. They may be on the MBI website, or you could, call a number there. You can look at their numbers, but they don't clearly spell out any of the assumptions that are made. One of the things that they did when they put out the first set of numbers, they assumed that each community is going to build their own. And by doing so, there would be no scales of the economy, so the number was inflated high. Then there was the issue of trying to get accurate dwelling numbers from town assessors. And then there was some mapping done looking at rooftops, some of which were sheds, some were barns, so those numbers got a little bit inflated. There were a few other assumptions that weren't quite right. I mean, you can look at those numbers, no doubt. When they were presented to us, WiredWest, the firm called Cartesian, said that these numbers are wrong. So why are you presenting them? So, I mean, it's a little bit difficult for us. But those may be accessible if you go to the MBI website. Yes, sir.
Is there a sunset on the money from the state?
Yes,
And when is that?
3 years.
From when?
From when it was actually, when it gets issued, when the money starts coming out.
So it hasn't been issued yet, so the 3 years has actually begun.
Well, it was passed last August, and none of the money has worked its way to MBI, which is the granting authority.
So at this point, from last August, is that ending, is that part of the 3 years, or is it until it's actually issued to?
When it's issued, when it's issued, and that may be within 30 days. So you got, 36 months to.
And does the construction of all of this have to be completed in that 3 years while that money's available, or can it extend beyond it if necessary?
If the money is committed for each of these projects, and it goes beyond a 3-year window, that money will be available. At the end of 3 years, if somebody says, oh, I need some money, I want to start this, it's not there.
And cost overruns is where the bond money starts to come in? From
Also-
$40 million, once that is expended, is that where the bond money from each of the individual towns, I know that's gonna be mixed into it, but so to speak, would be
So to speak, yeah.
extended on for over expenditures of the system, because obviously costs change over time for materials, labor.
The numbers are a little bit, not to exceed numbers, but in those not to exceed numbers are built in some caveats in case there are some change orders or something somebody didn't anticipate to cover that money.
And when this is all completed and the WiredWest has formed as a business, so to speak, what are you looking at for a model with employees to maintain the system? How many people per site, Berkshires, Franklin County, are you looking at for ongoing perpetual maintenance, people that will be employed by this?
I've got those numbers somewhere, not committed to memory.
Just roughly, I'm not expecting.
Enough to take care of it, which is not really a good answer. I could say that we're going to have a dozen bucket trucks and a driver and technician for each, driver and technician being the same. From a customer service perspective, probably 10 to a dozen people early on. That'll be pared back later on once the subscriber rate is up. There'll be a CEO, a CFO, and probably a half dozen or 8 other people working on a full-time basis, checking on the systems, making sure everything is operating correctly, dealing with any maintenance issues.
So based on today's income levels for employees, have these been figured for, I guess you want to say, figures for each employee for salaries into this budget?
Yep, you'll see them in the business plan when it comes out in the 3rd week in April. They're all listed.
Thank you.
Just one point I want to make in terms of people have been talking about the bond and the tax impact. And a point that hasn't gotten made tonight, it's been made before, is that the WiredWest plan has a $49 monthly payment for internet service, which is a 25 megabits service, which is anywhere from 20 to 5 times faster than what people have now. There's also the option for a $25 digital phone and with nationwide calling. That amounts to $74. If you compare that to what people are often paying now A good figure for satellite internet average is around 50. Some pay more, some pay a little less. And phone service is roughly around 75. So that adds up to 125 compared to 74. So there's some potential savings there. Now, yes, we are talking about a tax increase, hopefully for a very short time. But there is money that people are saving that can be applied to that.
And from the models from that meeting a few weeks ago, the one model that he went through in more detail kind of showed that for an average house in Warwick, which is I think $172,000 assessed value, the full $1.6 million once bonding is completed would result in a tax increase of about $24 a month. So if you add that to the $74, you're still paying less with the tax increase than you're paying now for your Verizon phone line plus satellite or Warwick broadband.
Another point that might be of some interest is the money, and you have to call him Jim next, he's had his hand up for nothing.
Looks like he's getting tired.
Yeah, I would be. The money from NBI will be defraying the costs early on, and at first, the model is to use a bond anticipation note. The bond anticipation note is interest only for, I think it's the first year, and I think it can be rolled over once. That interest is not due until the year after it's taken out. So there is a way in the stuff that Jim passed out where you really aren't looking at a lot of expense until later on, year 3. And presumably by year 3, there is income coming into WiredWest. So what we're talking about when we say the cost to pay for this on taxes is a worst case scenario. If WiredWest numbers work out the way they look like they might, there is hope that that would be considerably less.
It would ramp up to that, but the first couple of years would probably have no tax increase, and then it would be a little bit. And then once most towns were wired up and producing revenue, there would be money coming back from WiredWest.
That's right.
And one of the reasons I think why that was de-emphasized when you're thinking about voting and kind of think about what the worst case scenario was, there's some delay there. We get money back from WiredWest that most likely goes into the next year's budget. So money we get this year from this year's subscribers offsets the taxes for next year.
Who's we?
What was that?
Who is the we that you say we get?
The town of Warwick, the taxpayer. The subscribers across the system pay WiredWest. Warwick, as a town, gets money back from WiredWest that can be then applied against the tax increase to pay towards the bond.
And what's the turnaround time on that?
There's definitely delay in that. It's not immediate.
Yeah, we're looking at probably year 6 when that's all going to happen. You got to figure the first 3 years just for construction and getting everybody online. And the next couple of years, building up the bank, if you will, taking care of things that need to be taken care of. Then, year 6, there should be enough money to return to all the towns to satisfy their annual bond payment. So in essence, if in a perfect world, if this worked really well, you'd pay some interest and some principal for probably year 3, 4, and 5, maybe 6, and then beyond that, WiredWest's income back to the towns would cover the rest of it. And if you're looking at a 15 or 20-year bond, you know, if you're paying a few years on it and the rest of it's taken care of by WiredWest, not a big deal. It's still a scary number, I agree with you, but that's how we've got this model out. Yep.
This is back to something said a long time ago. You talked about this only applies to fully unserved towns. Now, if this moves ahead and takes shape and starts working as well as the moderately, hopefully, scenarios, not even the best case scenarios you talked about. Folks in partially served towns are also partially unserved towns. And I imagine that folks in those partially unserved towns might want to be part of this. Is that structure available? Would that situation help us or disadvantage us? And I look at that just seeing that.
To answer your question.
Imagining the good deals don't often come to Warwick if other folks, without other folks thinking it looks like a good idea to get in, and power works itself.
Okay, I need to back up a little bit. One of your questions was, if a partially served community in this area said, gee, we'd really like to have you come in and fiber to the premises, would you consider doing it? And would that, what kind of impact?
In a rarer state, how come that little town gets all this state money when I don't have internet either? How come we're not getting a piece of this?
Well, they are.
They are. Okay, let's take a look at Northfield, Conway, Buckland, Shelburne. As I mentioned earlier, the state, MBI, is trying to negotiate with the incumbent Comcast, basically to try to give them some money so they'll complete the build-outs in those counties.
Okay, thank you. I missed the implications of that.
Now, if there's another town that early on decided not to go with WiredWest and we decided to fiber them, that's more subscribers. I mean, their percentage would have to be high enough for us to go in there, but that's more money for the cooperative.
And that would help.
Oh, yeah. Revenue's a good thing. Yes, sir.
Paul Robbins, you talked about Warwick being in a cluster of towns in the area, and you gave a percentage, I believe, in some of these other towns, of the participation rate already. How is it that they managed to get the jump on Warwick, and we're so far behind here?
Shrewsbury has a broadband committee of 10 people.
Oh,
We're 3, but we're more than willing to have volunteers to help to get the word out.
Yeah, they have an unbelievable ground game. They've been doing demonstrations, they've held informational sessions. Like Tom said, they have 10 people that work on this every day, calling people up, knocking on doors, emailing, and that's why that number is where it is.
Another thing that I will mention is, we do have wireless right now.
Yes.
And that significantly changes the game for us over the other towns. I mean, we have hope. They had none.
Yeah, Shrewsbury had zero, nothing. And they desperately wanted to need it. And that's the difference. They just had a lot of people working the ground game, calling their friends.
So they all came out of the gate at the same time?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yes.
Well, when Claire gave those numbers out, though, I think she said that it was 80% of their 40%.
Correct.
So those numbers that she first quoted, it's not 80% of the town. They have 80% of their 40%. And that's why she gave, 20 town members need to be contacted still, where we have 112 because we only have 29% of our 40%. So when she spoke that, I think it confused some of us.
It's easy to get confused.
To begin with, their percentages of their 40% are much closer to it than what ours is at the moment.
Right, the goal was 40%, and the percentage that is displayed on the website is a percentage to that 40%, which is confusing, but, yes.
You have, I don't know how many models, I've heard 2, I've heard 5 that are out there. But in each case, when somebody has a model of a system and says it shows X, the modeler has produced a model and has said to his superiors, here's how this model works, here's the assumptions that I put into it, here's the model, and here are the results. Could we have that? I said, could we have that?
The models?
The models and the things that
Yes.
were
yes.
said by the modelers to their superiors about the conclusions that they drew from the models.
Yep, that's available.
Then we'd begin to have some idea, rather than having you saying to us, well, we've modeled this and it ought to work at 40%.
Actually, the model was shared with Warwick a while back. It's been revised since then.
Yeah, it actually looks better.
Some of the models are MBIs, and I don't know that those are publicly available.
They may not be, because they're not accurate. We sat through a meeting with probably a dozen sheets, and I don't know if you were at that meeting when Jim went through them and said, you know, forget this, it's inaccurate, and you had to get deep into it where there was some degree of accuracy. You know, it's unfortunate that, you know, puts us, WiredWest, and everybody working on behalf of WiredWest at somewhat of a disadvantage, and I can understand where there's a lot of skepticism until those final numbers with a complete description as to how we came to those numbers, with the assumptions and all that material. Again, the business model with the pro forma hopefully be ready before the third week in April, perhaps midweek, and each of those should go to each of the towns' finance committees that they can share with you. You can take a look at those. And once it's done, take a look at it, then you make up your mind.
Well, but we've been told, I don't know how many times,
Been told.
well, everybody in the road just about, I think, has told us, that we have a model. The model says that it is feasible to run the system and pay back all the towns if we have 40% participation. Okay, that model then must exist. Let's see it. Let's find out what the assumptions were that went into it, find out what the modeler told his superiors about how the model worked.
That will be available to you and your finance committee in April.
I'm sorry, it will be available.
In April.
Why is it not available now? It exists.
It's not done. It's not
But
finished.
you can't say it's not done when you've told us what the conclusions are.
They're being revised. I think that's the
Call on
point.
David.
David, he may be able to shed light on it.
I was wondering what software the model's being done in, because the software that was used for the model that Jim shared with me was some proprietary stuff that I never got my arms around and cost $5,000. And I'm hoping that what we're gonna see is an Excel model where we can actually look at the arguments and because I can give you a spreadsheet to say anything.
Yeah.
Not that I would, but so I really like it to be in an application that there's more than a few people that understand, and that, you know, Nick can go see if the calculations and the programming is.
It's not sufficient to say it's being revised,
Because
you've already come to conclusions about it's working.
I think it highly significant that there have been 4, maybe 5 models done independently that reach the same general conclusion that 40% take rate across the whole system and as things that go. I would be nervous if I wrote the first spreadsheet and everybody built off of it and they say, yeah, we all agree. Well, my first spreadsheet could have been flawed and we all built on that. Price Waterhouse says that 90% of all spreadsheets have errors in them. So, do you know what the application software is for?
I do not. That is Jim Draws Bailiwick. Do you have his number and email? I'd certainly ask him, and I'm sure he'll share that with you.
And are we getting, I'm a little confused. You're talking about business plan.
Which includes the pro forma. How we're gonna make our money, where we're spending it, how many employees we have.
But it's not per se a model, is it?
Well,
Includes a model.
it's a model, it's a pro forma. I mean, it's based on certain assumptions, what things currently cost. You do the math, you spread it out, like on an Excel sheet, although I'm not so sure it's that particular format. So yeah, that
But also to David's point, if you have the model in the software that you can run, then you can question the assumptions. You can say, well, what if we were wrong and it's actually gonna cost this much for maintenance? And put that in the number and see where things kind of.
run.
How sensitive is take rate if we vary?
Right, exactly. If it's more, if it's less, what does that do?
Some
That's
some
the
of
value
you
of the
were,
model.
some of you were here at the last informational meeting. Jim Draw was on the executive committee of WiredWest, made part of the presentation. And so you know, he's been a selectman in Covington for 25 years. He's involved in banking. He's caught a lot of errors that MBI has made. And personally, I really felt like I could trust what was coming out of his mouth. And I think Bill's been waiting a long time.
I haven't been waiting a long time. I actually have a number of questions now, but one of them goes back to clarification. You're expecting 32 towns to have 3/4 vote in the affirmative on this, and if it doesn't
That's our
happen,
goal, 2/3.
okay. Your goal is 2/3?
Well, no.
The two-thirds
Twice.
majority, yeah. Okay, now, and the goal is the 32 towns. If say 8 of the towns don't vote for it, what does that do to your
We're gonna
project?
have to look at it again, because if 8 of those towns were really high population towns with the potential for a lot of subscribers, talk about running models again, you're gonna have to run them 6 ways to Sunday to go, can this work? The assumption is that the 32 towns had signed a resolution to at least move this forward. And they all agreed that, let's see how this goes. The models were built with those 32 towns, figuring out the population in each of those towns. What kind of money is generated at 35% take rate, 40%, 45, and 50. That's why there's several models, just to see where those go.
I would
Okay,
imagine the good news for WiredWest is the towns that are most likely to vote this down are those towns that are, 9,000, 8,000 per. The towns that are going to have to borrow a lot more money even than Warwick, are more
Yeah.
likely to say no. I don't think so. And so those towns that have a lot of people that per premises is less costly are more likely to vote in favor of it because it's a smaller bond
Correct.
comparatively.
There would also need to be a debt exclusion vote, which would happen at the annual election, assuming that it would pass at town
right.
meeting.
And then a personal scenario is I'm hoping to build a house off the grid on top of my property. I don't want wire there. I do want internet. So for people like me, what would my service look like if, would I still be stuck with a satellite dish that, or am I gonna get comparable service through this?
When you build your house, run conduit, so you don't see wires.
I'm not gonna do it.
All right,
Talk to me and I'll put wireless in.
well, you can do a Wi-Fi off a pole, I suppose, on the street.
Well, my suggestion to Jim was that if it was a really long driveway, we could do a wireless shot.
Yeah. So you didn't want to bury the glass in the ground?
I've got, granite 2 feet below
Well, yeah, that's
all the way up.
Yeah, that's a problem.
So that's not a real good scenario. The other thing is, probably by the time I get my house built, you're gonna be online, and you're talking about 2017, 2018, 2019. With the way that technology moves, will there be something that puts your system in a second tier?
No, the only thing that's gonna change are the electronics on either end of that glass wire. Like your computer or your cell phone, you get the newest, the bigger memory, faster, more applications that it can handle. So you've got a device at the end of the glass run that's in your house, and one at the point of interconnect. Those are the two pieces that become outdated. They'll still function, but they may not handle the newest and greatest applications that the internet provides.
Would a wireless system off of the fiber be much improved off of like what I've got now?
It would be,
Yes.
Probably.
Yes,
so
especially if we put it on the lightning rod that you're gonna be putting up.
Hey. Yeah, I think I'll do that now too.
if you build it, we'll come to you.
Well, it'll be good most of the time, except when there's a storm.
This is a sign you're special.
Yes.
You said that you had run the model, if I am not mistaken, you run the model at 35% participation, 40%, 45, and 50% participation. Then there must be a piece of paper that says what the results were
Yep,
for
that's
those
correct. There is.
35, 40, 45, and 50.
Jim
Can
Brown
we
has
see
those.
it?
Yes, there are papers.
35% was a break even. 40% was where it made enough money to pay back the towns. And any more, which is also very possible, we have over 50% subscribed to Warwick Broadband now, means that we get back more money faster.
Sure. So to answer your question, yeah, it's on a piece of paper. Or
So
actually
we
a
can see
computer
that
program.
piece of paper for the different scenarios.
Contact Jim Draw. I do not have those. That's, I mean, he's the finance guy.
My other question has to do with this thing. It says, the handout today,
Okay.
it says that people will be able to run telephone and internet
Yep.
on the system, but the telephone may not work very well with high volume use on the internet and may interfere. This bothers me a great deal because people here are depending upon
It's describing what we have now in it.
depending upon this system
Oh, I think
solving.
that was talking about the disadvantages of Warwick Broadband. In other words, if you're on Warwick Broadband now and you use telephone over voice over IP, voice over internet, which people are doing, if you go and stream video while someone's on the phone in your house, it's going to degrade the phone signal. That was the point there. Maybe we should be clear.
Well, it appears
doesn't
The issue is that you
apply.
won't have this problem with fiber because the bandwidth is much greater.
It appears to be a comment about how fiber optics will work.
Can you point it out, Nick? I don't know where you're reading.
Well, let's see.
Two-pager, first page, down near the bottom.
Where is it, Brad?
So first page of the two-pager, down near the bottom. How will it be better than Warwick Broadband? So it's describing WBS as having that problem, which I can attest it does have.
So we're talking wireless has that problem. We're not
Wireless
saying fiber
as it
has
exists
that
today.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we have always been given the assurance that fiber is infinite. And therefore, we don't need to worry about that sort of thing.
Well, that is the intent of that question, is how is fiber going to be better than Warwick Broadband? I was kind of mentioning some of the disadvantages of the current wireless system we have now, which is if you try to do too many things at once over that limited bandwidth, it doesn't work very well.
Well, is it correct for me to say that my understanding of what this was is that the service for telephone and service for internet are competing with each other with the
I think it's safe to say you misread that part.
with the
Let's put it this way, there would be no degradation utilizing fiber by utilizing any program on the internet and a telephone. It just, with 25 megs to each house, it's just not gonna, it doesn't even know.
If you had 50 people in that house all downloading Netflix at once, then I could see you might hit it, but.
Or cat video.
It'd be very difficult.
You could have at least 4 or 5 watching high-def TV and talk on the phone. So
right.
at
There's
25.
There's,
hand in the back.
but you're saying there's no problem, I'm not talking about an individual household really, I'm talking about a community-wide thing. Are there going to be periods when I can lift the telephone and find I can't get good service because too many people were
No.
popping up?
No.
It's hard to believe when you think about our phone service that there could be something that is really reliable and consistent, but.
I guess to rephrase, what is the plan for WiredWest to handle kind of their kind of the aggregate capacity? Once more and more subscribers are coming online, using more and more bandwidth, what is your plan for making sure that you're always one step ahead in terms of your total bandwidth for the
We'll
system?
monitor it, and if we need to buy more bandwidth, which we can do, and the fiber that's strung will handle it, we'll monitor it. But you don't want to buy more than you really need, although I do have to say, the more you buy wholesale, the cheaper it is.
I think the important thing is that the pipe that's being put up has a lot of excess capacity. And so that capacity, while it isn't being utilized right now, can be brought online later.
I mean, people in cities with 100,000 or more that have fiber now aren't hitting this problem. And that's a much bigger system than we're talking about here in WiredWest.
Oh, it gets monitored. I mean, if it slows down, you just buy more and feed it into the pipe, which will handle it. Yes, sir, in the back.
As far as the subscription to WiredWest, once say this is in place, we're ready to go. Is this gonna be like a cell phone plan, so to speak, with a 2-year commitment or something like that to help us ensure that we're gonna keep these subscribers once they've committed to it? I know you're asking for $49 now for the 40% to get that, I guess you wanna say, starting point.
Yeah.
But has the committee thought about how the plan will come together so you can continue the residual income and move forward?
So we can
don't
keep
have
them?
people drop off. I know, once you have high speed, it's a great thing, and most people probably won't, but there is that possibility.
Yeah, I mean, you can get some churn, if the service is good and there are no maintenance issues, they, like you said, they'll enjoy the 25 meg.
Because obviously, all towns want to get to that point where you're going to be making money to start the return of the bonds.
Yeah. We talked about a 12-month or 24-month contract, and that really hasn't been decided. Some people are a little shy of signing contracts for either cell service or basically
And I know
anything.
most people are trying to break away from that, and major companies are doing the same with the trend, but just being a young business to...
My personal opinion is I would not sign a contract, because once they get that service, they're gonna be so impressed with it, as long as they can afford it, they'll stay with it.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if David could tell us how many people we've lost from Warwick Broadband, sort of as a way of answering that.
Well, we've never had anybody willingly go from Warwick Broadband back to satellite or to satellite. We've had a couple cases where we just could not provide reasonably good service, and they've had to. And we've had more cases where people say, if this only works half the time, it's still better than dial-up, it's still better than satellite. We have seen very little, very few folks have just said cancel it, I don't use it.
Yep.
We have, since we've increased our throughput, thanks to fiber backhaul,
Yep.
and more facilities and reinvestment, we now sell you for $30 what you got for $50 2 years ago. So we've had a few customers say, I want to try the 30, and they haven't, in most cases, said, no, start billing me 50 and turn it up.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
We don't consider satellite a competition, and we're certainly not growing as fast as we used to, but we keep adding new customers, and then there's the just transactions where somebody sells a house, and at this point, we don't take the equipment down, we leave it. Because the new owner,
They probably wouldn't be able to sell the house if that wasn't there.
it's actually been the case.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm wondering if as a cooperative with these different member towns, everyone's coming in right now at $49 a month. Is there a point where it would be possible to offer a sliding scale or a subsidized rate, the way the electric company has that set up, where people who, if you're lower income, you can pay a different base rate because it's a service for the community?
Yes, that discussion has happened with, we're going to call it profits. Sometimes people have an issue with a cooperative or what they consider a nonprofit with profits. And that's a decision that will be made by every delegate of all the member towns. Okay, we've got X amount of dollars, here are some choices, you guys hash it out, and whatever the majority decides. If you want to subsidize low income, great. Fine, as long as we've got money to pay the bonds back through that period of time, anything in excess, yes, that's quite a possibility.
A couple other points that are relevant is that the WiredWest plan allows for seasonal residents. The details of how that are going to be worked out haven't been figured out, but we have some snowbirds that come in the summer, and there'll be a provision where they can get the WiredWest plan. They're encouraged to sign up. Another thing is that there is it's important, full disclosure, there's a connection fee that's part of the WiredWest plan, which is $100, correct?
It's a $100 fee, one time only, and that's basically setting up protocols at 1 Federal Street and basically plugging it in. Just to hire the technician to get all that stuff done.
And the technician is going to come to
Your house.
your house and make the connection so that then you're set to go.
Then you have a choice. Once it's at your house, you can choose to do a Wi-Fi in your house or have it hardwired with Cat 5. But the Cat 5 and the Wi-Fi unit, the modem, is going to be at your expense. We'll get to the box. How you get it elsewhere in your house, it's up to you. Yes, sir.
I'm just looking at the tax implication. It says here the max tax implication is $24 a month for each household. Is that to pay the bond down or just take care of the interest on the bond?
That was an average.
Firstly, that was based on an average, so that number is valid for a house valued at $172,000, but that would be to pay the bond. So that would be that's why I say worst case. That's when we hit the full bond cost before we're getting any money back from WiredWest to offset it.
And remember, the first 2 years, it looks like we're not going to have any tax impact. So, okay, by year 6, that's when we're hoping, if all goes well, that it gets paid back.
That's for the 40% scenario.
That's just for the bond
scenario.
bond
You
scenario.
can pay everybody back by year 6.
Oh,
yes, based on the 40% scenario.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Warwick Broadband has retained earnings of $36,000 as of the end of last year. They're 20 to 30,000 to the better this year. It'll take several years to build out the project. And I have a legal opinion from our council that we could use, the town meeting could appropriate that enterprise fund to pay the interest. And it seems to me reasonable that we would be able to easily carry the first 2 years of interest only at no cost to the taxpayer. And I think we'd be able to hit that first year. I wonder, one of the things that troubles me though is when cash does start to flow from the co-op back to the towns, the time lag that's been described, where the money has to hit our books and then get certified by the Department of Revenue and become free cash and get appropriated. Would you look into the possibility that the consortium, the collaboration, could actually just write a check to pay a portion of the bond debt on behalf of the town? There's no law that says the case you can't pay my MasterCard bill, if she wants to.
Good question.
And that would speed up the cash flow.
It would speed it up by 12 months.
Yeah. Or more.
You could pay in his credit card bill.
No, but it's a plan. It's a model.
Just an idea.
Just a floating idea.
I didn't realize I was gonna have as many financial questions, otherwise I would have brought Jim with me. But again, just to reiterate, if you want a closer look at those things, as he's going through the modeling, before the final is done in April, contact me.
Or contact one of us, and we'll do it too. We do go to the meetings, so we see him, and we can track it down if you don't want to. The phone numbers and emails were on the back of the letter that came to people in the town.
Also, to let everyone know, there is now a broadband webpage, and that will be hooked up to the main Warwick website. And we will try to keep that current with information when it becomes available and links that may or may not be useful.
I got a hand right there.
I just want to go back and touch on the momentum issue you said before and why we should do this in May. I think we tend to be a town of people who are a little cautious and want to kind of see what other people are doing. And I think we all know that this town meeting is going to be extremely contentious with other issues coming up that are going to take up a lot of time and make us, many of us, very cranky. So I'm wondering, I think that we take a really big risk of not getting a 2/3 vote at this meeting because of all these other circumstances that are kind of swirling around us. And we have an awful lot of questions here that aren't completely answered. And believe me, I was the first person to send the $49 in. I think, I think this is wonderful. But I'm worried that if it gets voted down in May, you are going to lose more than momentum, because then if you come back to them again, they're going to say, we already answered this question, don't come back to us.
Well,
So, I wonder if it wouldn't be better to do a fall special town meeting where we can focus on this and not be distracted by the death of a million cuts which we're facing in May. And so that we don't risk losing all the momentum and the bleeding on the ground.
That's a decision you folks can make.
I think that's a Warwick decision, not really
Yeah,
a
it's not
WiredWest.
WiredWest.
I know,
We're
I
not
guess I
saying,
just want to make sure whoever maybe out there, select
Well,
members,
the
who have to
broadband
decide on
committee
what the warrant should be.
Wants to hear all these opinions. We're going to talk about it amongst ourselves and talk about it with the select board.
And I'm hearing it.
the other thing,
Really?
well, just a further comment, a little more time, you potentially can get more pre-sign-ups done. And by doing that, if you can get those people who sign up ahead of time to come to a special meeting and share with the other folks in town why it's important for the town. And we haven't even really touched on the pluses for the town. We've been focusing on modeling and the taxes and so on and so forth. But I suspect that your school, part of your town budget's pretty big, like it is in my town. And we had a long-range planning committee put together a number of recommendations, one of which was to do whatever is possible to get broadband internet access to the district's towns, and there are 9 towns, or there soon will be 9 towns, including Rowell, where the kids can't do extracurricular stuff, they can't do research, they can't do their homework at home. We're buying textbooks where we could do e-books instead and save a bunch of money. There's just a whole bunch of things spiraling around the school budget issue without adequate broadband access, which can benefit the towns by lowering the cost to the towns that you're assessed during the budget process. That's just one of a whole bunch of benefits. Then the other issue is, what if somebody would like to move to historic Warwick, and they look at a few houses, and then they finally discover they have no access to the internet. You know, they're not gonna move to the town. You're building a new home, but you're thinking about all this stuff. There could be a few other parcels for sale, that potentially a builder could come in knowing full well that an infrastructure is going to be in place, or work from home, or start a little business.
Just a comment, I think most people here want to have fiber.
Yep.
But I think the biggest issues are the mechanics of getting it wired to every home in town, and then the second issue is paying for it. Those are the two really huge issues, because I think most people, if they had the choice, yeah, they'd like to have it, but it's the mechanics and the cost.
Can you find another 112 people?
Well, I think what's gotta happen is, you gotta show us that it's financially feasible
Yep.
to go down this road.
Yep, and that stuff's coming, as I mentioned. So you'll get that, then you can make your decision. Bill?
If we did put this off to a special town meeting vote in the fall, of the other 32 towns, what kind of information would we have? Are they voting, are all of them voting in the spring? Or what's the scenario look like with getting feedback from other communities?
Some are gonna vote in the spring. Some are talking about special meetings. Some are very adverse to special meetings. Some of the towns have said, well, we're gonna give it a shot in the spring, this May, and if it goes down, we're gonna bring it back. And some of the towns, in their experience, have had not a bad experience with bringing the same question back up. Now, each town's a little bit different. We can certainly keep you posted on our website in terms of which towns have had that article on the warrant and how it went. So, I mean, it's all over the place.
Thank you.
One thing to know about the $49 sign-up fee is that it is totally refundable. Even if you didn't like the brownies I brought, we will refund the money. So it's, you know, you change your mind, you move, you know. We're just trying to get the ball rolling so we can work with the state.
Yeah, the state needs to see some commitment too. I mean, they're not gonna spend the money if only 20% of all the residents in western Massachusetts want connectivity. They're just simply not gonna do it. They'll figure out a way to spend it somewhere else.
And also, we need some providers of the bond, you know, and that isn't automatic. You need people to know that, hey, these towns really want this. See, they've sent their money in.
Well, I think for those of us that are really interested in having it go, the more information we get that we can impart to community members who don't have time to come to the meetings, or don't come to the meetings, or just hope whatever happens, happens. If you talk to other people that you know, that you think might be remotely interested, that can help our numbers without them, you know, spending their time to come here because they have 50,000 other things going on at home. So, I mean, that's a thought process that we can all impart in our own interest of it, you know, not to be pushy about it, but just be like, hey, you know, I was at the meeting the other night, these are the things I've learned, you check the website, you can get a hold of, you know, Scott, Bill, or Tom, or John, and just, you know, get it out there more, because I'll be honest, I've not come to any meetings before. We've lived in town for 8 years, and I've decided that, you know, these things are very important to me and my family. So it's time for me to start coming, even if I don't do anything more, and come and listen, and, you know, maybe have an opinion.
You know, and that's exactly why Shutesbury and Wendell and Egremont have those numbers. Exactly what you said. Just get the information and pass it along to a neighbor. Just say, do you realize that we have a possibility here? and, you know, there's a 3-year window where we can have a bite at this big apple, where the state's giving us money, and you'll have broadband access, and you'll be able to do a whole bunch of things, and it's good for the community. If you like this community, this is a good thing. It's a scary number, I agree. But there's a way to get that done. Yes, sir.
I disagree. I think the reason that Wendell and Shrewsbury have such numbers is they don't have Warwick Broadband, who is doing a credible job. It certainly isn't broadband by today's definition, but it knocks the socks off a satellite, and it's adequate to a lot of people's needs. So people wonder about the risk, but if Warwick were without Warwick Broadband and all people had was dial-up or satellite, there would be the same hunger in Warwick that there is in Wendell and Shrewsbury.
What's your subscriber count for Warwick Broadband?
Between 50 and 55%. The takeaway from that to me is that this will work. If it works for 40%, it did take us 5.5 years to get to this level. It was very incremental. And wireless is a system that permits that sort of phased growth. Because there isn't much cost to go and buy somebody's house, or double back later.
Your subscriber, your connection fees have come down, which makes it more enticing also from the fight to the west.
That's a very good point. We finance Warwick Broadband in part out of our subscribers' pockets. The first 100 or so subscribers wrote us a check for $500, and we lost money for the first couple of months because that didn't even cover the full cost. So and we still have a perceptual problem that it costs $500. I bet you could find some people that still believe that's true.
Well, there's probably a few people in town that don't know that this might come about. But I think you're correct to a certain degree, but everybody needs to know about it. There are a couple of towns that have nothing, like Middlefield, Monroe.
They have partial DSL. I've been working with them. Half the town's got DSL.
Yeah, they do, but they're not real happy. I have an issue in Ashfield with DSL in the village, which is going to be a hard sell. But once they find out that it's going to go away, that'll be an issue. Yes.
Also, I don't know if this is pertinent or not, but Warwick does have the highest median income in the county. Not income age in the county, and I wonder how we're doing with the old folks.
That's a good question.
I know I'm not doing well with my mother, who's 82.
Mine either, she's
not
88.
doing well with this. And she is part of a really big group of people of that age. And I wonder how that's going to play out at town meeting. I don't feel good about it.
Some communities have, council on aging or senior centers that teach remedial computer operations, emails, and if they have a robust enough connection, they'll Skype some of their relatives and show them some of the things that are available to get them to embrace their technology, which is going to be, it's not easy to do. But if that's not being done, is it being done here in town at all?
No, we just have Carol Foote come and talk to them.
Oh, but,
Well,
yes.
I can say, being that I'm around during the afternoon or mornings, I usually walk with the group of ladies in town that walk on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings. And they're very split, but the fact that one of them was here for the last meeting and came away with what I pay today is going to cost me more than what I'm going to pay when this all happens, makes a big difference. So when you have maybe some of the younger community members who have kids, who it's most imperative for, or they feel that it's most imperative. I know that most of our community, for the kids, are much more willing to open their pocketbook for anything, whether it's, a little increase in taxes or whatever. So, it's just a matter of trying to get as many people to explain it, because the way you explain it may not be the way I explain it, but what I say maybe makes more sense
If you sell
to
it,
somebody.
that's fine.
It's just one of those things where
Yep.
You know, it may work, it may not work.
Maybe you can get to the point where the walking group all goes along with it and start their devices.
Did you see that bear? No.
The broadband committee would be happy to go to the senior meal site or the women's guild. I don't know when I know the senior meal site's every week. If that would be a help, and the women's guild does monthly events. And we also are going to be at the library from now through town meeting. John and I were there this past Saturday mornings, explaining Bill's going to be there this Saturday, and
Tom, it might even require a door-to-door campaign for some of the older people that are just can't get
It's
out.
true.
They can't get into these places. Somebody like yourself that's very knowledgeable in your committee to spend a little bit of time with some volunteers to go around like with some literature in hand. Just basic bullet pointed literature and answer their questions.
Yeah, that's actually
Out
on
of
the
a
table.
hostile environment such as town meeting.
Sounds like a volunteer.
If there were 30 people in this room, and you talked to 3 or 4 people who were not aware of it and hadn't signed up, you'd be there. Sounds easy, everybody's busy, I understand that. But it would take just that little bit of effort to do. Just, each person say, I'm gonna contact 3 people. I'll call them, my neighbor down the road, the person who is at the little convenience store I go to, or, although I didn't see a convenience store.
There is one.
there is one. You won't find one.
You guys got one?
Saw a lot of trees.
Just focusing on the phone issue is huge.
Probably.
Just the phone by itself, not even talking about internet. If you go to your phone plugged into the wall and pick it up and it doesn't function. When I first moved to town, the month before I bought a smartphone. It got stupid as soon as I moved to Warwick. It doesn't do a damn thing. The landline, I'm going to quote Andrea here, she posted on the L, when I first signed up for the L, she put a post questioning, did anybody else lose their phone service? And I believe you said something about going out to the telephone pole with your blow dryer. And I thought, where did I move to? On a rainy day, you have to go out to the telephone pole with a blow dryer. But it's true, if we have rain or even heavy fog, I go to my phone and there's nothing there. So for people, elderly people who rely on the phone alone, that's huge. They don't need to be Skyping or Googling or doing any of that.
One other aspect of robust broadband is telemedicine, and that whole area is exploding now for monitoring people, allowing people to stay in their homes longer, and you can't do that very well with anything less than 25 meg. Yes, sir.
To the point of telephones, anybody with a 544 local exchange, plain old telephone line, that's ever tried to use the speakerphone function on their phone, you ever had a good experience with that? It's just awful.
Mine's fine.
Mine works too.
Amplified noise.
Maybe I live on the edge of Irving.
So
Out the good line.
Alright, well, we've got fiber line
We get
phones here
phone
at
lines.
town hall, and we're now able to use a conference phone and have if you sat through a selection meeting where we're either using my cell phone to talk to a shut-in select board member, or we're using the old telephone lines, it was intolerable. Now with the fiber
It's clean.
phone, it's clean as can be, even if you're talking to somebody on 544 number.
Wait, I just want to get this straight. Andrea, you were standing outside with a blow
My
dryer in the
husband was
rain?
standing outside.
Oh, good thinking.
Like, one,
Taking all the safety.
You gotta go, girl.
if you're standing next to
Hospital.
Come on, telemedicine.
Yeah, so actually, I asked that last night at the select board meeting. If I'm going to be at home and I'm monitored by doctors, what would they be able to do? And it's just like 5 or 10 years, what would be all the options that fiber would allow? Could they monitor
pressure,
they could do a glucose, they could check on a pacemaker, pulse. There's just, you know, and I'm really naive to what it is. I haven't done a lot of research, but I know that a lot of that's being done now, and there's a lot of exploration as to what can be done in the future in terms of device and what types of bodily functions you can monitor.
And we would need a fiber cable to do that?
You need robust broadband in order to get clean information back and forth.
So that might be another point to bring up with senior lunch and, you know, Winfield and stuff too.
Oh, yeah. And actually, there are a couple of devices that technical people here, in terms of your cell phone in your house. If you wanted to use that, there's a device that can be used, get strange looks here. Actually feed back into the fiber, so, you know, it could be a two-way conversation, calls coming in and calls
So it's
going
like an
out.
app or something on your phone?
Well, you could put an
You
extender on it.
could put an extender on it, or actually you could do, if you had a Wi-Fi in your house, the technology.
You can piggyback on it.
Yeah, you could piggyback on it. So if it did work in your house, or you moved in front of the refrigerator currently and you know, dropped the call, that could remedy the situation.
So would you say that living in a town with fiber would allow you to live there longer, like the whole aging in place movement of, you know, your house is retrofitted so you can bring in a wheelchair, and there's like special light switches. Do you think that having fiber would kind of also be an avenue to, you know, keep people in a small town for a better quality of life for a longer time?
You're talking,
I think, yes. And the other thing is, if you're in a town with fiber, you're gonna be more regular.
It'd be more.
You'll live a longer time if you're not staying on the road with the hair dye.
But yes, I think people could live at home longer. They've done studies about that. And it's,
anything else? Does
Does this affect regular cell phone service?
we were just talking about that in the house,
Yeah, that's what.
if you got a cell phone, that you have to either drive to work or out of town to utilize it.
We have a mini tower in our house, but you go outside too far.
Oh.
right, it'd be the same thing.
Yeah.
What we're doing with the cell extenders is essentially what you do with fiber as well.
Okay, so if you have a contract with a company for service, you don't need that with fiber?
Well,
You
no,
do for
we're
the cell
talking
phone.
about two different things.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
The cell phone could be extended by the fiber, but you'd still have to be, you know.
You'd have to be contracted with a cell
Well, you
provider.
wouldn't have to be, you could go to Terry and get
Well, yeah,
whatever it is he's
you
selling.
get a track phone.
He's got some good deals.
But that extender that probably cost you $400 or $500 to boost the signal, is that what it does?
Well,
Yeah, probably.
well, there's the one that goes with
Piggybacks
Warwick
on the
broadband.
internet.
And so
Oh, okay, so,
basically, people are doing the same thing with Warwick broadband now, but again, you got the same issue is that if you're already using the broadband, you're streaming video or something, and then you try to use the phone, it doesn't work. And
Called the airwave.
It's almost
Yeah,
$3 a
so,
month.
if that's what you're doing now, it'll work better
We
and
work,
consistently?
for the most part, yes, and it runs off the broadband.
yeah.
It'll be the same, only you won't have any issues of it slowing down or dropping calls.
Now, being that we lived here and a lot of times we have power outages, as long as the fiber lines stay up,
Yep.
we will still have those accesses,
We're
correct?
gonna have.
Like, because we have an old style phone that doesn't plug into the wall. So as long as the actual phone line is working, we can call and report the outage.
Yep.
But my son, who gets his phone calls for work through our microcell tower, through the broadband, when that goes out, they can't reach him.
Yeah.
So,
Unless you're better.
but with the
Yeah.
fiber, as long as that stays up and running,
Well, you'd have the same issue. The issue is when with the phone service, you get the power over the line. So with the fiber, it's over, it's light. So
Right.
you would need a battery backup in your equipment. And I don't know if the equipment WiredWest is going to be talking about includes that.
Well, we talked about supplying mini ups to a lot of
Right,
computers.
right. Because I know when I had fiber through Verizon, they had a small battery backup in the unit that only worked on the phone, so that you would have phone service for a limited amount of time in an outage.
We're looking for 24 hours of usage, and probably longer if you're not using.
But if you had a generator, that'd be a moot
Oh, then
point.
you'd be fine. The issue is that basically a small battery backup unit, so for a short outage, you would still be able to use the system without the generator.
Well, if you live in Warwick, buy a generator.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah.
But any emergency we should have.
So I'm not trying to beat the issue to death here, but for emergency services, we get a couple of maybe 3 or 4 EMTs in town. Response time's pretty good because the ambulance is like 10 minutes away. Are there any studies about high-speed internet helping emergency services so that we could help explain to folks on our department, like, hey, this would also make it a more robust, even with a small number of people on the department, it would be a better service that you're offering to your townspeople.
Yeah, do you have, I'm assuming that your fire department, police, or DPW have two-way radios that have dead spots?
That have what?
Dead spots.
Yes, and a lot of that is actually a problem with the state police towers right now. But I would say it's more of it's a glitch on their part, and if it's operating normally, we can pretty much access at least simulcast or Shelby control from anywhere.
So you can get a hold of dispatch and they can get a hold of you. And,
Yeah. Our dead spots end up being when we isolate to just a function in this town off of a different channel, Mount Grace. Then just the topography ends up being a little bit difficult some places.
Yeah, you're fortunate because Mount Grace is, obviously pretty high. I've run into a few towns where they get dead spots at the firehouse. And what we're gonna do is put up some transponders that are gonna, or repeaters. They're gonna run back down through the fiber so that we can fill in those spots. They'll key them and it'll be good. So if that's not an issue here, that's good. Just hope that the state police get their act together.
Yeah, they're working on it.
So it would help with two-way, as some kind of relay if we did have dead spots? Is that what you were gonna?
I was talking about repeaters in spots that have poor coverage with either handhelds or in-vehicle high-band two-way radios. And I didn't know if you had any of those issues here in town. And if you did, there's a solution to that, running it back through the fiber.
So has it been brought up in other WiredWest towns?
Yes.
Okay.
So, how do we do? Okay.
Thank you. Good, nice work.
Thank you.
More questions? Any more?
More
Glenn.
I will get Jim back here almost now.
Yeah.